When leaders think about their growth, they usually treat it like something that can be added on top of an already functioning business. Another direction, another layer of growth on top of what already works. And that's what makes this one dangerous. Because the real exposure is not whether the strategy makes sense. It's where the design behind your strategy was ever built to carry what that direction would require once it became real. I was a top-performing wealth advisor, leader, and executive in the wealth management industry for 23 consecutive years, building and running multi-billion-dollar businesses. So what are you going to learn? 1, why your growth is harder to design into a business than leaders think. 2, how early movement gets mistaken for real adoption. 3, why the core business keeps pulling people back. And finally, 4, how to tell whether your growth design was actually built to take hold. When your design gets rolled out, it usually matters more to you than you say out loud, because this is your call, your direction, something you believe can create more growth on top of a business that is already working. So when it first gets introduced to your team, you look for signs that it may be starting to take hold. Your people, they engage. And even a few people, they'll move early. And there's enough movement to make it feel like the direction is getting a real start. And you're not looking for final proof yet, but you're looking for enough to believe that the business may be starting to take it in. So you stay close to it. You watch the people that start leaning in first, and you keep on checking whether the early movement is starting to spread, but nothing else shuts off. Your core business is still fully live. Production still has to move. Your client activity, it's still there. And the same pressure that was already sitting inside the business is still there too. And the only difference is that both things are starting to run at the same time. And that's when the weight of this starts building. And not in a way that looks broken, just in a way when your real business starts feeling heavier, when something new needs your time, your follow-up, and your energy before it actually settles in. And even inside your team, the split between them starts showing up. Some people move early, and they'll create enough activity to keep the direction visible. But there's others who are slower to adopt. They'll need more of your reinforcement, more support across their curve, and more time before this becomes something they can actually move with. So you stay on top of it, and you'll keep reinforcing it, and you'll keep trying to broaden it. Because from your seat, it still feels close enough that more attention, more repetition, and more time from you may help it spread. But your core business, it keeps pulling your people back because the work that it already produces is still there. And the accountability they already carry is still there as well. So while the new direction stays active, the core business keeps winning with real gravity. And once that starts to happen, the shape of everything starts to change. Your direction is still alive. It's still present in your meetings, but it's no longer building the way it felt like it might have early on. And it's just not spreading through the business the way a live direction needs to if it's really going to take hold. So over time, it starts to move differently, less like something the business is absorbing and more like something being kept in motion. And it starts drifting lower, not all at once, just gradually, until eventually it becomes one more thing still in motion, but no longer truly mattering because it never transformed the business the way it was intended to. And that's where most leaders misread what the business is actually showing them, because nothing failed. It's just the design you created just got exposed. The issue was not uneven early contribution. That was expected and designed for. The issue was whether the business could absorb staged adoption without turning early capability into concentrated carry. Because the first thing you missed was what the early movement actually meant, because it was real, but it was still too narrow. The few people that moved early was just enough to keep your belief high and enough to make it feel like the business might be starting to take in. But that was never the same thing as staying spreading broadly enough to support that same conclusion. Because what you had early was just movement at the front, not evidence that the direction had really started settling into a business the way the design needed it to. And that matters because once early movement gets read too generously, the whole picture starts getting interpreted through a stronger lens than it actually is earned. The second thing you missed was this was asking the business to carry before it could ever become naturally accretive, because nothing else was shut off. The core business stayed fully live. The same people were still carrying the same responsibilities and the same accountability they were already carrying. And now this needed more of their time, more explanation, more reinforcement, more follow-through, and more of your attention. So before the business could ever benefit more from the new direction, it first had to carry more of it. And that's where your design started breaking shape, because the added burden showed up before the broader payoff did. And your coordination, it expanded before results did. And your reinforcement, it expanded before adoption did. And your attention moved before the business pull did. This is not yet living inside a normal flow. It's still depending on every extra carry to stay in motion. The third thing you missed was how this would spread more broadly and what it actually required for that to happen. because the issue was never that some people moved earlier than others. That's always going to happen. What was missed was that this was never just going to be sitting on top of the existing business like an extension. It requires stage integration, and those stages had not been built in strongly enough, because others are always going to need to be more intentionally accounted for across the learning curve for this to spread the way you intended. And that requirement had not been built in strongly enough. So the people who moved first ended up carrying more of the visible progress than they should have, while the broader group was not coming along fast enough for that early movement to become a shared responsibility. And once that happened, your business did what other businesses do under pressure. It protected the core, not because people stopped caring, not because they suddenly resisted. They just did the math. The core was still what they already produced. It was still what already carried the known math of the business. So when the new direction you had set had not earned enough pull to change their focus, people stayed anchored to what was already proven. So your new initiative kept getting their airtime without gaining enough gravity. And that's when it changed shape. It stayed present enough to remain in your meeting rhythm, but it did not spread cleanly enough to change the business the way it was intended to. It just drifted lower. Not gone, not dead, just no longer carrying enough weight to reorder the business the way you thought it would. And from your seat, that's what makes this last part most expensive, because there was still enough there to keep believing in it, because you kept leaning in harder to keep it moving. More attention, more reinforcement, more of your own force trying to close the gap between what the initiative still could become and what the business was actually showing you in real time. And that extra effort by you buys you time, but it also hides the real issue from you, because once you force what keeps the direction alive, the business is no longer carrying it the way the design said it would, because growth changed the work. It required more sustaining leadership from you, more support across the curve, and more shared carry than the design had truly accounted for. And that is the failure. It didn't fail by stopping. It failed by staying too narrow, too heavy, and too dependent on force for too long. And here's what makes this more expensive than it looks. This was not just a missed initiative. It was a failed attempt to change how the business would grow. So when it doesn't take hold cleanly, the damage is not just that the direction lost momentum. The bigger risk is what you take from it. Because if you don't understand why it stayed narrow and why your core business kept winning the attention, you start walking away with the wrong conclusions. You'll start thinking that your team wasn't ready. Maybe the timing wasn't right, or the idea you had just didn't have enough strength. But that's where your future decisions get weaker. Because once you lose trust in the business's ability to carry your change, you'll stop designing real transformation moves with the same conviction. And you'll always pull back towards what already works and what feels safer to manage. Not because you no longer want growth, because you no longer trust the business to absorb what growth actually requires. And that's why this matters. Because this is where you'll find out whether the growth was designed to take hold in the business the way it was intended to. Not just get attention or create movement, but actually transform the business. Because that's one of the lines we watch very closely at Elitevate. Because in a world full of information, people choose authority that protects them from being wrong at the most expensive moments. Every week I break down the real strategy behind top performance for wealth advisors and leaders ready to operate at the level they're built for. This is Elitevate. We cut through the fluff, no hype, no theory, just strategy, psychology, and execution. If this hits home, subscribe. You're not just watching and learning. You will become the standard others measure against.